So that allows teachers in Finland and Singapore to focus and to be attracted by things like the nature of the work, the good working conditions, and the respect for the profession. That's why they go into it, not for the money. And of course, you can see that's a little more complicated in a place like the United States, where teachers may be paid well in relationship to some other professions, but it certainly doesn't buy them the same quality of living or standard of life as other high-status professions like doctors, lawyers, and engineers. So that's a little bit on human capital. But as I said before, I don't think human capital is the only critical ingredient. So we do need to pay some attention to human capital. But again, if you look at Finland and Singapore, technical and social capital are also tremendously important. In terms of the technical capital, I think any of you who walked into schools in Finland and Singapore would be blown away by the quality. What's more, you wouldn't be able to tell whether you were in a school in a wealthy suburb or wealthy community or in a low-income community. The facilities across the country are exceptional. They have excellent technology. Finland and Singapore in particular, as well as the Netherlands, are well known for having very rigorous curriculum, excellent textbooks, and some very sophisticated assessments. Singapore and Finland are quite different in terms of their approach to assessments, but one of the things that's crucial is that teachers in schools are involved in using sophisticated assessments and developing sophisticated assessments and using those results to help them improve performance. Just to talk briefly about Finland for a moment, in the United States, we have a big focus on what you can call summative assessments, which are standardized tests, usually at the end of a year, which may tell you students' rank or school ranks or things like that, but aren't very helpful in really helping you figure out what to do day in and day out to help students improve. In contrast, Finland emphasizes formative assessments, diagnostic assessments throughout elementary school so they can identify students who are having problems or falling behind early, and so that those students can get the help that they need. As I said, this is quite different from the US focus on summative assessments, but it's also quite different from what Norway does, where they have a focus on neither summative nor formative assessments. And so in the US and in Norway, I think this quote from Dylan William is appropriate. He suggests when talking about assessments, if pilots navigated the way most teachers teach, they would leave London, head west, and at the end of 8 hours ask, is this New York? Right? Very little guidance is provided. But once again, from my family's experience in Norway, one of the things that I was most surprised to find was that not only did my kids have very little homework, but on top of that, they also had almost no assessments of any kind. And that means they didn't even get marks in class, nor grades at the end of a semester or at the end of the year. Up until 8th grade, there are no marks or grades of any kind, and that means that you can get to the 8th grade without knowing whether you're ahead, behind, or on track. Now, it sounds a little bit crazy when I describe it this way. I think there are actually a lot of really good reasons why they have that system. They have much more of a focus on holistic development, developing all aspects of the child, on developing the social cohesion of the group, on developing equity. So there are lots of positive benefits. As an American, I would have liked to have seen a little more academic focus for my kids, but I have to say they had a fabulous time. But I also have to say that by the end of the year, I was telling my Norwegian colleagues who were concerned about the performance of their Norwegian students on these international tests, I had to point out to them, so you're telling me that your kids have very little instructional time, there's almost no homework, there's no assessment, and they still do as well as the US? So, something to think about. But that's a little bit, so I think developing these assessments as Finland and Singapore do, that can be an important part of helping teachers to be more effective and students to learn more, to improve their learning. But I also think that this notion of social capital is also tremendously important. The notion of these social and personal relationships that link people and organizations across schools and across districts and other support providers. And I think in this country, when we think of systemic reform, we think about aligning goals, curriculum, assessments, and rewards and incentives. It's a very structural idea. It's almost as if it doesn't matter who's in the system as long as the structures are aligned. But that, I think, is very different from what we see in both centralized countries like Singapore and decentralized countries like the Netherlands. Those are places where they have tremendously powerful social networks of people, organizations, and institutions that enable them to share information, ideas, and expertise about what's going on that helps to create some consistency and some coherence in these systems. What's more, that helps to build political and public support, which is absolutely crucial, because one of the key things that the political and public support provides is stability. It provides stability, and it maintains the provision of those resources and those facilities and the respect for the profession that are so crucial to the high performance. So all of these tend to feed one another. So all of this has just been a quick overview to say that, in fact, human capital does matter, and teachers do matter. And I think many of you may be familiar with the fact that possibly more than almost any other solution these days, that's where people are focusing. If we could just fix teacher evaluation and fix teachers, then we could solve these problems. That's consistent with some research that suggests that teachers are what makes the most difference in student learning. So I agree, yes, teachers matter, and they do. But then I think ultimately we should ask, should that be a surprise in a system that's weak overall and where there are massive inequities in the distribution of technical, human, and social capital? Now, I do actually think there's some things we can do. I also know that I'm out of time. And I would be happy to talk with any of you about what some of those solutions are. I do, in fact, think that both in Cleveland and around the country, there are projects and there's a wide variety of work that are moving in the right direction, including developing some of these more sophisticated assessments and more rigorous curriculum so that teachers can actually figure out what to do to help diverse students and low-performing students to make improvements. I think we have to think really carefully, not just about the equitable distribution of teachers with minimal qualifications. We have to think about the equitable distribution of teachers who are the most powerful and the most productive, who can teach our kids the higher order skills that many of us care about these days. There are also experiments of bringing not just individual teachers into new schools, but bringing teams of teachers that take advantage of the relationships amongst those teachers to make them more effective. There's a program called Teach Plus in Boston some of you might be interested in. But I also think this notion of building social capital, building on community organizing efforts, building on partnerships like that between PEP and the Cleveland and other area schools, groups like City Year and Citizen Schools, which can help in tutoring and after-school programs. All of these organizations help to bring resources, technical capital, skills and expertise, and relationships that can significantly improve student learning. And I just want to conclude by saying that I think we often hear nowadays that education should be the moonshot of the 21st century. But I just want to remind people that in many ways, putting a person on the moon is a technical problem. Right? The problems that we're talking about today in education are human and cultural and social problems. And that means the problems aren't out there, right? The problems are in here. They're with us. And the solutions lie with us as well. So ultimately, I think the solution lies in the willingness of each one of us to figure out how to work together over the long term and to make whatever contributions we can to improve the system for every child. Thank you very much.
Tom, thanks so much for your remarks. Very enlightening. And we'd like to give you this token of our appreciation. It's our 12 commitments of re-education.